6 months after that pivotal night when Lyrelai knocked on Marcus's door, the former outpost had become the capital of humanity's first interstellar protectorate. The Kepler 442b Cooperative Zone, as it was now officially designated, represented a new model for human expansion that emphasized partnership over conquest, cooperation over competition. The Earth delegation had arrived with grand plans for formal treaties and structured negotiations, only to discover that the real work of building an alliance had already been accomplished by engineers, scientists, and families working together in the field. Ambassador Catherine Walsh, Earth's most experienced xenodiplomat, had initially been frustrated by what she termed the irregular nature of the situation, but she had quickly adapted to the reality of dealing with a relationship that had grown organically from mutual need and respect. The political crisis that Marcus had feared never materialized, largely because the benefits of the human-Velthera partnership became too obvious to ignore. The hybrid radiation processing technology had proven so successful that both species were able to expand into previously uninhabitable regions of the planet. Human settlements were now thriving in areas that had been considered impossible to colonize, while Velthera communities had expanded beyond their traditional radiation zones for the first time in their recorded history. More importantly, the partnership had attracted attention from across human space and beyond. The Galactic Council, which had initially expressed concern about unauthorized first contact, had ultimately praised the Kepler 442b model as an example of how expanding civilizations could interact with indigenous species. Several other human colonies were now requesting Velthera technical assistance with their own energy challenges, while Velthera exploration teams were working with human surveyors to identify suitable worlds for joint colonization. Marcus had found himself permanently reassigned from atmospheric technician to director of interspecies cooperation, a position that had been created specifically for him. His days were now spent overseeing joint research projects, facilitating cultural exchanges, and serving as humanity's primary expert on Velthera relations. It was a responsibility he had never sought but had come to embrace with the same practical determination that had led him to open his door that night. The real heroes of the story, however, remained Lyrelai and her children. Lyrelai had become the Velthera's primary liaison to human civilization, her intelligence and diplomatic skills proving invaluable in navigating the complex process of interspecies integration. She divided her time between the cooperative zone and the restored Velthera cities in the north, serving as a bridge between worlds in the most literal sense. Kira and Zeph had grown into symbols of the partnership's potential. Now healthy and thriving, they moved easily between human and Velthera communities, their natural linguistic abilities allowing them to serve as translators and cultural interpreters. Kira, in particular, had shown remarkable aptitude for the hybrid technologies that were emerging from the collaboration. Her intuitive understanding of both human engineering and Velthera biotech, making her a valuable researcher despite her young age. But the most significant development had been the discovery that the two species were not just technologically compatible. Careful biological studies had revealed that humans and Velthera shared enough common genetic markers to suggest a shared evolutionary history, possibly indicating that both species had originated from the same ancient seed world or had been influenced by the same precursor civilization. Dr. Kim, now the head of the Joint Research Initiative, had become fascinated by the implications. Marcus, we're not just looking at successful first contact. We might be looking at a reunion between cousin species that were separated by cosmic events millions of years ago. The biological compatibility, the intuitive understanding between our children, the way our technologies mesh so naturally, none of that is coincidence. The discovery had philosophical implications that extended far beyond Kepler 442b. If humans and Velthera were indeed related species, it suggested that intelligent life in the galaxy might be more interconnected than anyone had previously imagined. It also raised questions about humanity's destiny among the stars and the potential for discovering other related civilizations. The success of the Kepler 442b model had not gone unnoticed by humanity's political establishment. Admiral Santos had been promoted to oversee all human expansion activities in the sector, while Ambassador Walsh had been assigned to establish similar cooperative protocols for future first contact situations. The Terran Expansion Coalition's protests had been quietly dismissed as the economic and strategic benefits of the partnership became undeniable. But Marcus knew that the real measure of their success wasn't in political recognition or technological advancement. It was in the simple fact that two species that had initially been strangers were now working together to build something better than either could have achieved alone. It was in the sight of human and Valthara children playing together in the compound's gardens, their laughter creating harmonies that neither species had known before. On the anniversary of that first contact night, Marcus stood in the same spot where he had first seen Lyralee through his security cameras. The small outpost had been preserved as a historical site, though it was now surrounded by the sprawling facilities of the cooperative zone. Rain was falling again, carrying the same mineral-rich scent that had characterized that pivotal evening. Lyralee joined him at the memorial plaque that commemorated their first meeting. Her children, now tall and confident, were leading a group of human and Valthara youngsters in some complex game that seemed to involve both physics and music. The sight brought a smile to Marcus's face as he remembered the desperate, exhausted mother who had knocked on his door. "Do you ever regret it?" Lyralee asked, her English now fluent though still carrying the musical harmonics of her native language. "The choice you made that night? The protocols you violated, the risks you took?" Marcus considered the question seriously. His decision had indeed cost him his quiet life as a frontier technician. It had thrust him into the center of interstellar politics and made him responsible for decisions that affected billions of lives across two civilizations. It had been the most difficult and stressful period of his life. "No," he said finally, "I don't regret it. Some choices are bigger than the people who make them. Sometimes you just have to trust that doing the right thing will work out somehow." Lyralee nodded, her silver eyes reflecting the purple-tinged sunlight that was breaking through the clouds. "My people have a saying, the storm that drives you to shelter may be the wind that carries you to new skies. That night we were seeking only safety for our children. But we found something greater. We found family among the stars." As Marcus watched the children play their impossible game, mixing human technology with Valthara biorhythms to create something entirely new, he understood that Lyralee was right. What had begun as a humanitarian crisis had become the foundation for a new kind of civilization, one based on cooperation rather than conquest, on shared discovery rather than competitive advantage. The human had opened his door to strangers in need, and in doing so, he had opened the door to a future where the phrase, alien species, might someday become as obsolete as the barriers between worlds. In a universe vast and often hostile, two civilizations had found in each other not competition for resources or territory, but partners in the grand adventure of existence itself. Marcus Chen, the atmospheric technician who had become humanity's first interspecies diplomat, smiled as he watched the children create their impossible harmonies. Whatever challenges lay ahead among the stars, whatever other species might be waiting to be discovered, humanity would face them not as conquerors or competitors, but as part of a growing family of civilizations united by the simple recognition that intelligence, wherever it arose, deserved compassion, respect, and the chance to reach for the stars together. The next 72 hours transformed Marcus's outpost into the most important location in human space. Ships began arriving within hours of Admiral Santos's authorization, bringing teams of engineers, scientists, diplomats, and military advisors. The small facility that had once housed a single technician, now buzzed with activity as humanity, scrambled to respond to its first contact with an advanced alien civilization, but the real work was happening in the northern radiation zones, where human and Valthara technical teams were working together in a desperate race against time. The situation was worse than Valdris had initially revealed. The Valthara civilization wasn't just facing power shortages. Their main fusion plants were on the verge of catastrophic failure, threatening to irradiate their cities with levels of radiation that even their adapted biology couldn't survive. Marcus found himself at the center of it all, serving as the primary liaison between the two species. His days were spent translating not just languages, but entire philosophical approaches to technology and cooperation. The Valthara operated on principles of collective decision-making and shared knowledge that sometimes clashed with human tendencies toward competitive advantage and proprietary information. Dr. Sarah Kim, the lead engineer from Colonial Command's technical team, had initially been skeptical of the Valthera technology. "It's too elegant," she had complained to Marcus during their first briefing. "Human engineering is all about redundancy and fail-safes. Their systems seem to rely on biological intuition and adaptive responses. What happens when something goes wrong?" But as she worked alongside Valthera engineers in the radiation zones, her skepticism had transformed into amazement, and then into something approaching reverence. The alien technology didn't just work differently than human systems. It worked better, adapting to changing conditions in real time, self-repairing minor damage, and optimizing performance in ways that seemed almost alive. "Marcus," she had said after her third day working with the Valthera teams, "we're not just looking at advanced technology. We're looking at a completely different approach to the relationship between biology and engineering. They don't build machines. They grow them. And somehow those machines understand their environment in ways our computers never could." The cultural exchange was proving to be as valuable as the technological one. Lyreley had become the unofficial ambassador for Valthera's civilian concerns, working with human social scientists to establish communication protocols and cultural understanding frameworks. Her children, Kira and Zeph, had become living symbols of the potential for cooperation between the species, their rapid adaptation to human customs and language serving as proof that the two civilizations could indeed coexist. But not everyone was pleased with the developments. Marcus had received several encrypted communications from various human political factions, each trying to gain advantage in what they saw as a potentially lucrative technological partnership. Some wanted exclusive access to Valthera radiation processing technology. Others were concerned about the implications of sharing human manufacturing techniques with an alien species. The most troubling communication had come from the Terran Expansion Coalition, a political group that advocated for aggressive human colonization policies. They had made it clear that they viewed the Valthera as potential competitors for territory and resources, regardless of their current dire situation. The coalition was pushing for a military solution that would place the alien settlements under human protection, while ensuring that any technology transfer occurred under human terms. Admiral Santos had been fighting off political pressure from multiple directions, but Marcus could see the strain wearing on the experienced officer. During their daily briefings, the Admiral's face showed the exhaustion of someone trying to balance military readiness, diplomatic necessity, and political survival. "Chen," the Admiral had said during their morning conference, "I'm getting pressure from Earth Command to classify this entire situation as a military operation. There are factions back home who think we should be dictating terms to these aliens, not negotiating with them as equals. Sir, that would be a catastrophic mistake. The Valthera have been watching us for months. They understand human nature better than we might want to admit. If they sense that we're trying to dominate rather than cooperate, they have the technological capability to simply disappear again, and next time, they might not be so willing to trust us." "I know that, Chen. But I also know politics, and this situation is becoming a lightning rod for every competing faction in human space. I need something that shows concrete benefits for humanity, something that proves this partnership is worth the political cost." The answer came from an unexpected source. Little Kira, who had been playing with human children in the expanding diplomatic compound, had made a discovery that stunned both human and Valthera scientists. While experimenting with a simple human toy, she had unconsciously interfaced her natural bioelectric abilities with the device's circuitry, creating a hybrid human-Valthera technology that exceeded the capabilities of either species' individual efforts. Dr. Kim had been the first to understand the implications. "Marcus, do you realize what we're seeing here? It's not just about technology transfer. The real breakthrough might be an actual biological compatibility between our species. If Valthera bioelectric abilities can interface with human electronics, we're looking at cybernetic possibilities that neither species could achieve alone." Valdris had been equally excited by the discovery, but for different reasons. Through the translation devices, he explained that Kira's natural adaptation suggested that the two species might be more compatible than anyone had dared hope. "Your children and our children, they learn together, grow together, understand together. Perhaps the future holds not just alliance, but true unity of purpose." The breakthrough had immediate practical applications. Teams of human engineers and Valthera biotechnicians began working together to create hybrid systems that combined the best of both approaches. Human manufacturing precision merged with Valthera biological adaptation to create technologies that were simultaneously more robust and more intuitive than either species could produce independently. Within days, the first prototype hybrid radiation processors were online in the Valthera settlements. The devices successfully stabilized the failing power systems, while also demonstrating new capabilities that excited scientists from both species. The processors could adapt to changing radiation levels in real time, optimize energy conversion based on environmental conditions, and even communicate with biological systems to prevent harmful exposure. But the real test came when news of the partnership reached the broader human political establishment. Earth Command had finally received full reports about the first contact situation, and the response was immediate and decisive. A full diplomatic mission was being dispatched from Earth, carrying with it the authority to negotiate formal treaties between humanity and the Valthera. More concerning was the news that the Terran Expansion Coalition had filed formal protests with the Galactic Council, claiming that Colonial Command had exceeded its authority in negotiating with an alien species. They were demanding a full investigation of the contact, protocols, and questioning whether Marcus's initial actions had compromised humanity's negotiating position. Marcus prepared for the arrival of the Earth delegation. He reflected on how much had changed since that rainy night when Lyrelay had knocked on his door. What had begun as a simple act of compassion had grown into the foundation of humanity's first interstellar alliance. But it had also exposed the deep divisions within human civilization about how to approach relationships with other intelligent species. Looking out at the bustling compound where human and Valthera workers labored side by side, where human children played with alien youngsters, and where two civilizations were learning to build a shared future, Marcus knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, the choice to open his door had been the right one. Some decisions transcended politics and protocol. Some choices were about the fundamental values that defined what it meant to be human in a vast and complex universe. Marcus made the decision that would echo through history. Instead of waiting for Colonial Command's investigation team to stumble upon the Valthera settlements and potentially trigger a military confrontation, he chose to force the issue himself. Within the hour, he was transmitting a priority communication that would change everything. Colonial Command, this is Outpost 7 Alpha. I need to speak directly with Admiral Santos immediately. Classification level, First Contact Protocol 77 Alpha. Marcus's voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly as he input the codes that would flag his message as the most urgent possible communication in human space. The response came within minutes. Admiral Santos's weathered face appearing on the communication screen with an expression of barely controlled alarm. Chen, what the hell is happening out there? Are you telling me you've made contact with indigenous life? Yes, sir. Intelligent, technologically advanced life. They've been living in the northern radiation zones and they need our help. Sir, this isn't a military situation. These beings came to me for assistance, and I believe we have an unprecedented opportunity for peaceful cooperation. The Admiral's expression shifted through several emotions before settling on grim determination. Chen, I'm looking at satellite data showing significant energy signatures in your area. How many of them are there? Marcus glanced at Valdris, who nodded slowly. The alien leader understood that full disclosure was now necessary. Sir, I'm currently hosting a diplomatic delegation of 3 ships. Their leader is here to discuss a formal alliance between our species. They have technology that could revolutionize human colonization, and they need our materials science expertise to save their civilization. Jesus Christ, Chen. Do you understand what you've done? You've hidden first contact for days, violated every protocol in the book, and now you're talking about alliances. I should have you court-martialed and shipped back to Earth in chains. Yes, sir, I understand the severity of my actions. But, Admiral, if you could see what I've seen, if you could understand what they're offering and what they need, you'd know that this is bigger than protocol. This is about the future of human expansion and the survival of an entire alien civilization. Admiral Santos was quiet for a long moment, his eyes studying something off-screen. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of command decisions that could affect millions of lives. Chen, I'm looking at deployment orders for a full military investigation of those northern regions. 3 battalions of Marines atmospheric assault vehicles, and enough firepower to level a small city. If I don't countermand those orders in the next 6 hours, your alien friends are going to find themselves under military occupation. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Sir, that would be a disaster. They're not hostile. They're refugees seeking help. A military response could turn this into exactly the kind of conflict we want to avoid. Then you better give me something substantial. Chen, I need proof that these aliens are worth the political earthquake this is going to cause. Because when word gets out that we've made contact with an advanced alien species, every faction in human space is going to want a piece of this. Valdris had been following the conversation through his translation device, and now he stepped forward. His silver eyes met Marcus's, and some unspoken communication passed between them. The alien leader reached into his clothing and withdrew another device, this one larger and more complex than anything Marcus had seen before. Admiral, Marcus said, I'm about to transmit something that will change your perspective on this situation. The Valthera leader wants to share a sample of their technology directly with Colonial Command as a gesture of good faith. Valdris activated the device, and Marcus's equipment suddenly came alive with new data streams. The readings were incredible, showing energy conversion efficiency rates that exceeded anything in human technology by orders of magnitude. But more than that, the device was demonstrating real-time radiation processing, safely channeling ambient energy from Kepler 442b's environment and converting it into usable power. Admiral Santos watched the data scroll across his screen, his expression shifting from skepticism to amazement. Chen, are you telling me they can process raw radiation into clean energy with this kind of efficiency? Yes, sir. And they're willing to share this technology in exchange for our help stabilizing their failing power infrastructure. Admiral, we're looking at the solution to humanity's energy problems in space. Worlds we've written off as too radioactive for colonization could become abundant sources of clean power. The Admiral was quiet for several minutes, clearly consulting with advisors off-screen. When he returned his attention to the communication, his demeanor had changed completely. Chen, I'm suspending the military investigation and reclassifying this as a diplomatic first contact situation. But I need you to understand something. This is now the most important negotiation in human history. Whatever agreements you reach with these aliens in the next few hours will set the precedent for all future human-alien relations. I understand, sir. What are my orders? Your orders are to keep them talking and keep them happy, until I can get a proper diplomatic team to your location. But Chen, I'm also authorizing you to begin preliminary negotiations. If these aliens are as advanced as they appear, and if their technology is as valuable as you suggest, then we need to move quickly before other human factions find out about this and try to muscle in. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling even more heavily on his shoulders. He was no longer just protecting 3 alien refugees. He was negotiating on behalf of all humanity. Sir, there's something else you need to know. The Valthera leader has indicated that their civilization is facing an immediate crisis. Their main power systems are failing, and they may not have much time before their situation becomes critical. How long do we have? Valdris had been monitoring the conversation, and now he spoke directly to the communication device, his musical voice carrying harmonics that the translation system struggled to process. Human Admiral, our time grows short. Our home suffers and our people weaken. We seek partnership, not conquest. We offer knowledge freely given, ask only for aid freely received. Admiral Santos stared at the screen for a moment, clearly struggling to process the reality of conducting a conversation with an alien intelligence. Tell your leader that humanity is prepared to offer assistance, but we need to establish formal diplomatic protocols. Can his people wait for our official delegation to arrive? Valdris responded before Marcus could translate. We can wait, but our world cannot. Each day of delay costs lives among our people. We propose immediate technical cooperation, while diplomats engage in formal processes. The alien leader activated another device, and suddenly Marcus's workshop was filled with holographic displays showing detailed schematics and technical specifications. The complexity was staggering, but even Marcus could see that the designs represented fusion of Valthera radiation processing technology with human materials, science, and engineering principles. Admiral, Marcus said, his voice filled with awe. They've already done the preliminary design work for the technology transfer. They've figured out how to adapt their systems to work with our manufacturing capabilities. Sir, they're not just offering us their technology, they're offering us a complete partnership. Admiral Santos studied the holographic displays for a long moment before speaking. Chen, you may have just negotiated the most important alliance in human history. Hold your position and continue working with their technical team. I'm fast-tracking a diplomatic mission to your location, but in the meantime, you have my authorization to begin immediate humanitarian assistance to their people. As the communication ended, Marcus looked around his small outpost, now filled with alien technology and human equipment working in harmony. Lyrelay was helping her children explore the holographic displays, their musical laughter mixing with the hum of machinery. Valdris was already coordinating with his team through their crystalline communication devices, preparing for the massive undertaking of saving his civilization. Marcus Chen, atmospheric technician turned first contact specialist, and now acting human ambassador to an alien species, realized that his simple act of compassion had grown into something that would reshape the future of both civilizations. And it had all started with a desperate mother knocking on his door in the rain, begging him to save her children. 3 days passed before the first Valthara delegation arrived at Marcus's outpost. During that time, the small shelter had transformed from a simple research station into something entirely unprecedented. The first embassy between humanity and an alien civilization, Lyrelay had quickly proven herself to be far more than just a desperate mother seeking help for her children. As her offspring recovered their strength and health under Marcus's care, she revealed herself to be highly intelligent, scientifically educated, and apparently of significant status among her people. Her communication device allowed for increasingly sophisticated exchanges with the Valthara leadership, and Marcus began to understand that he was dealing with a technologically advanced civilization that had been deliberately hiding from human detection. The children had recovered remarkably quickly. Little Zeph was now alert and active, those silver eyes bright with curiosity as he explored the outpost under his mother's watchful supervision. Kira had quickly learned to operate several of Marcus's simpler devices, displaying an intuitive understanding of technology that suggested her species might have an innate gift for engineering. Both children had begun picking up basic English words with startling speed, their musical voices giving the familiar sounds an almost lyrical quality. Marcus had used the time to prepare for what he knew would be the most important meeting in human history. He had studied every scrap of information about diplomatic protocols, though none of the manuals had covered first contact with a technologically advanced alien species. He had also worked with Lyrelay to establish basic translation protocols using their respective communication devices. When the Valthara delegation finally appeared, Marcus understood why they had remained hidden from human surveys for so long. Their vehicles were unlike anything in human technology, seeming to phase in and out of visibility as they approached. The craft moved silently through the air, their hulls reflecting and bending light in ways that made them nearly impossible to track with conventional sensors. 3 ships landed near the outpost, their forms elegant and organic-looking, as if they had been grown rather than built. From them emerged a group of Valthara that made Marcus realize how desperate Lyrelay's condition had been when she first arrived. These aliens were clearly healthy and well-fed, their blue skin luminous with vitality, their hair tendrils moving in complex patterns that seemed to communicate emotional states. The delegation was led by an individual who introduced himself as something Marcus mentally translated as Valdris. He was taller than Lyrelay, with more pronounced angular features and hair tendrils that glowed with subtle bioluminescence. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in Marcus's chest, and his silver eyes held an intelligence that was both alien and immediately recognizable. Through the translation devices, Valdris explained the situation facing the Valthara with a clarity that left Marcus both impressed and deeply concerned. Their civilization was indeed highly advanced, but it was also entirely dependent on their unique ability to process and channel radiation. For thousands of years, they had lived in harmony with the high-energy environment of the northern regions, their technology and biology co-evolving to take advantage of what would be lethal conditions for most other species. But their success had become their weakness. Over generations, they had lost the ability to survive in lower radiation environments. They were essentially trapped in their radioactive homeland, unable to expand or explore beyond the boundaries of their specialized ecosystem. When their main power plant began failing due to age and wear, they faced the prospect of slowly poisoning themselves with the very energy source that sustained them. The technology that Lyrelai had given Marcus was more than just a power converter. It was a sample of their most advanced radiation management system, a device that could theoretically be scaled up to stabilize their failing infrastructure. But the Velthara lacked certain materials and manufacturing techniques that were common in human technology. They needed human help to build the larger systems required to save their civilization. In return, they were offering something that would revolutionize human space exploration. Their radiation processing technology could make dozens of previously uninhabitable worlds accessible to human colonization. High radiation environments that had been written off as too dangerous could become abundant sources of clean energy. The partnership would benefit both species enormously, but Valdris also made it clear that the Velthara were taking an enormous risk by revealing themselves. They had observed human expansion for years, studying human behavior and technology. They had seen the way humans sometimes reacted to the unknown with fear and aggression. Their decision to trust Marcus, and by extension humanity, was based largely on his actions toward Lyrelai and her children. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. He was no longer just a frontier technician. He had become humanity's first ambassador to an alien civilization, and the choices he made in the next few hours could determine whether that relationship would be one of mutual cooperation or devastating conflict. The political situation was even more complex than Marcus had initially realized. Colonial Command wasn't just a bureaucratic organization. It was part of a larger human political structure that included various competing factions, each with their own agendas for human expansion. Some groups would see the Velthara as potential allies and trading partners. Others would view them as obstacles to human dominance in this sector of space. Valdris seemed to understand these complexities as well. Through careful questioning, Marcus learned that the Velthara had been monitoring human communications for months. They understood the basic structure of human politics and the potential for both cooperation and conflict. Their decision to make contact now was driven by desperation, but it was also calculated to take advantage of humanity's current political situation. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent message from Colonial Command. Marcus's heart raced as he saw the priority codes, but when he opened the communication, he found something unexpected. Rather than a routine check-in or administrative update, the message contained intelligence, reports about increased alien activity in the northern regions of the planet. Human surveillance satellites had detected energy signatures and movement patterns that didn't match any known natural phenomena. Colonial Command was preparing to send an investigation team to determine whether the planet might be harboring indigenous life forms. If such life was discovered, standard protocol required an immediate halt to all colonization activities pending a full xenobiological assessment. Marcus realized that time had run out for subtle diplomacy. The Velthara delegation had arrived just hours before human military forces would begin sweeping the northern regions. If first contact happened under those circumstances, with human soldiers encountering hidden alien settlements, the potential for misunderstanding and conflict would be enormous. He looked at Valdris, whose silver eyes reflected the same understanding. The alien leader had clearly been monitoring human communications as well. They both knew that the next few hours would determine whether the meeting between their species would be remembered as the beginning of a new era of cooperation or as the spark that ignited an interstellar conflict. Lyrelai gathered her children close as the adults faced the weight of decisions that would affect the future of both civilizations. In the small outpost that had become an embassy, surrounded by alien technology and human equipment working in harmony, Marcus prepared to make the choice that would define his species' relationship with their new neighbors among the stars. Marcus spent the next several hours monitoring the children's condition while trying to establish better communication with their mother. The infant was responding well to the glucose solution and warmth, its breathing becoming steadier and stronger. The older child, who appeared to be female based on subtle differences in facial structure, was actively curious about her surroundings despite her obvious exhaustion. The alien mother had introduced herself through a series of gestures and sounds that Marcus eventually understood to be her name. The closest human approximation would be Lyrelai, though the actual sound contained harmonics that his vocal cords couldn't reproduce. She had pointed to her children with similar musical names that he mentally labeled as Kira for the older child and Zeph for the infant. As dawn approached, bringing Kepler 442b's strange purple-tinged sunlight through the reinforced windows, Marcus found himself facing a decision that would define not just his own future, but potentially the future of human-alien relations in this sector of space. Lyrelai had managed to communicate more of her story through the holographic map and simple gestures. Her people, who she indicated were called something like the Valthara, had lived in the northern radiation zones for generations. The high-energy environment that was lethal to humans had somehow become beneficial to their species, providing energy that their unique physiology could process and use. But something had gone wrong. Through her gestures and the expressions that crossed her delicate features, Marcus understood that there had been some kind of catastrophic failure in their main settlement. She drew patterns in the air that suggested machinery breaking down, power systems failing, and people becoming sick. The radiation that had once sustained them was becoming unstable, threatening to poison even their adapted biology. Lyrelai wasn't just a refugee. She was a scout, sent to find help for her entire people. Her journey to Marcus's outpost hadn't been random at all. The Valthara had been watching human operations for months, studying their technology and capabilities. They had seen how humans could manipulate and control radiation, how their machines could process and channel energy safely. They needed human help to save their civilization. Marcus understood the magnitude of what she was asking. The Valthara weren't just asking for shelter from a storm. They were asking for a complete technological partnership, one that would require revealing their existence to Colonial Command and potentially to the entire Galactic Council. The political ramifications would be enormous. But as he watched little Kira play with a simple holographic toy he had activated for her, her silver eyes bright with wonder and her musical laughter filling the small outpost, Marcus found that the political considerations seemed less important than the immediate human connection he felt with his family. The alien device that Lyrelai had given him proved to be even more remarkable than he had initially thought. When he connected it to his analysis equipment, the readings were extraordinary. The device appeared to be some kind of energy converter, capable of processing raw radiation and transforming it into usable power, with an efficiency that far exceeded anything in human technology. More importantly, it seemed to be designed to interface with both biological and mechanical systems. If his readings were correct, the Valthara had developed technology that could safely channel high-energy radiation to enhance their own biological processes while simultaneously powering their civilization's infrastructure. Marcus realized he was looking at the solution to one of humanity's greatest challenges in space colonization. Most worlds suitable for human habitation lacked abundant energy sources. Fusion technology was reliable but limited, and solar collection was inefficient on many worlds. But if the Valthara technology could be adapted for human use, it would revolutionize colonial expansion. The potential for mutual benefit was staggering. Humans could help stabilize the Valthara's failing energy systems using their advanced materials science and engineering capabilities. In return, the Valthara could share their radiation manipulation technology, opening up entire categories of previously uninhabitable worlds for human settlement. But first, he had to keep 3 aliens alive and healthy while figuring out how to present this situation to authorities, who would initially view any alien contact as a potential threat. His communication array chimed, with an incoming message from Colonial Command. Marcus felt his stomach drop as he recognized the priority coding. It was a routine check-in, but one that required immediate response. If he failed to answer, automated systems would flag his outpost for investigation. Lyrelai noticed his sudden tension and approached cautiously. She could clearly sense that something was wrong, though she couldn't understand the human technology that was demanding his attention. Marcus looked at the communication panel, then at the alien family that had placed their complete trust in him. He thought about the political consequences of hiding first contact, about the potential court-martial, about the way this decision would affect his career and possibly his freedom. Then he looked at baby Zeph, sleeping peacefully in the thermal blanket, tiny chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm of healthy sleep. He looked at Kira, who was watching him with those luminous silver eyes, somehow understanding that an important moment was happening, even if she couldn't comprehend the details. Marcus activated the communication system and composed his report. Colonial Command, this is Outpost 7 Alpha. Routine status report follows. Atmospheric processing on schedule, all systems nominal. Weather has been particularly challenging this cycle, but no significant delays anticipated. Equipment functioning within normal parameters. Shen out. He closed the channel and looked at Lyrelai, who had been watching intently even though she couldn't understand the conversation. Somehow she seemed to realize what he had just done. The gratitude in her silver eyes was profound, but underneath it, Marcus detected something else. Determination. Lyrelai activated her own communication device, a crystalline structure that had been hidden in her clothing. It pulsed with soft light as she spoke into it in her musical language. Marcus didn't need translation to understand what was happening. She was reporting back to her people, telling them that she had found help, that the humans could be trusted. Within hours, Marcus knew, his small outpost would become the center of the most significant interspecies contact in human history. The Valthera would send representatives, perhaps even refugees, if their situation was as desperate as Lyrelai had indicated. Colonial Command would eventually discover what was happening, and when they did, the political earthquake would be felt across human space. But as he watched Lyrelai gently stroke her children's hair while maintaining her communication with her people, Marcus felt a sense of rightness about his decision. Sometimes the most important choices weren't about following protocol or protecting careers. Sometimes they were about recognizing the fundamental connections that transcended species boundaries. The human had opened his door to strangers in need, and in doing so, he had opened the door to a future that neither species could have imagined alone. Whatever came next, whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead, it would begin with the simple act of compassion that had brought an alien family in from the rain. The smaller child was barely breathing. Marcus could see the rapid, shallow rise and fall of the tiny chest, and when he gently touched the infant's forehead, the skin felt cold and clammy despite the blue tint. The mother watched his every movement with desperate intensity, her silver eyes tracking his hands as he examined her children. Marcus had basic medical training, standard for all frontier technicians, but this was far beyond anything he had prepared for. Human physiology was one thing, but these were clearly a different species with potentially different biological needs. Still, some things seemed universal. The children were cold, wet, and obviously malnourished. The infant showed signs of severe dehydration, while the older child's breathing was labored and irregular. He looked up at the mother and spoke slowly, keeping his voice calm and gentle. "I'm going to help them. I don't know if you understand me, but I'm going to try to help." She tilted her head slightly, her hair tendrils shifting like curious snakes. Then she nodded, a gesture that was remarkably human-like. Perhaps some forms of communication were indeed universal. Marcus moved to his medical supplies, pulling out thermal blankets and basic diagnostic equipment. The scanner beeped as he ran it over the infant, displaying readings that meant nothing to him. The device was calibrated for human physiology, but it could detect basic vital signs in most carbon-based life forms. What it showed made his stomach clench with worry. The infant's core temperature was dropping rapidly and its heart rate was erratic. Without immediate intervention, the child would be dead within hours. Marcus wrapped both children in thermal blankets, their small bodies disappearing into the metallic folds. The mother helped, her long fingers surprisingly gentle as she adjusted the coverings around her offspring. When their eyes met over the bundled forms, Marcus saw a flash of something that might have been hope. Working quickly, Marcus prepared a warm glucose solution, something basic that most life forms could process. He had no idea if it would help or harm the alien children, but doing nothing was certainly not an option. Using a small feeding tube, he managed to get a few drops into the infant's mouth. The tiny creature swallowed reflexively, which Marcus took as an encouraging sign. The older child was more alert, those silver eyes watching Marcus with a mixture of fear and curiosity. When he offered the glucose solution, the child looked to its mother first. She spoke softly in their musical language, and the child accepted the nourishment. As Marcus worked, he studied the alien mother more closely. She was clearly exhausted, but she never let her guard down completely. Her eyes constantly scanned the room, cataloging exits and potential threats. Her posture suggested someone who had been running for a long time, someone who expected danger to appear at any moment. Her clothing told a story of its own. Beneath the mud and stains, Marcus could see that the fabric was finely woven, with intricate patterns that spoke of advanced textile work. This wasn't the clothing of a primitive being. The cuts and tears appeared to be from claws or thorns, suggesting a flight through wilderness, but the underlying quality indicated a sophisticated civilization. Marcus activated his communication array and hesitated. Standard protocol demanded that he report first contact immediately to Colonial Command. They would want to know about the aliens, about their apparent intelligence, about the fact that humanity was not alone on this world. But one look at the exhausted mother and her dying children told him that involving the bureaucracy right now would likely be a death sentence for all three of them. Instead, he accessed the planetary database, searching for any information about indigenous life forms that might have been missed in the initial surveys. The files were extensive, covering thousands of species from microscopic organisms to large predators, but there was no mention of anything resembling the beings now in his shelter. As if reading his thoughts, the alien mother began to speak. Her voice was melodic, rising and falling in patterns that almost sounded like singing. She gestured to herself, then to her children, then toward the door. Her meaning seemed clear. She was trying to tell him where they had come from. Marcus wished desperately for a universal translator, but such devices were still experimental and far beyond the equipment available to a frontier outpost. Instead, he tried a different approach. Moving to his workstation, he activated the holographic display and brought up a three-dimensional map of the local area. The mother's eyes widened as she saw the terrain displayed in floating light. She approached cautiously, her children still bundled in the thermal blankets. With one long finger, she pointed to a location about 50 kilometers to the north, in a region that the surveys had marked as uninhabitable due to high radiation levels from mineral deposits. She spoke again, her voice taking on an urgent tone. She gestured to the area on the map, then to herself and her children, then made a sweeping motion that seemed to indicate many others. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather outside. There were more of them. A settlement, perhaps even a city, hidden in the radiation-soaked northern regions where human scanners couldn't penetrate effectively. The surveys had been wrong not because of incompetence, but because the aliens had deliberately chosen to live in an area that would be invisible to human technology. The mother continued her story, pointing to different areas on the map. Her gestures became more agitated, and Marcus began to understand that something terrible had happened. She pointed to the radiation zone, then made a gesture that looked like an explosion or collapse. She indicated her children, then herself, then traced a path on the map that led from the northern region to his outpost. She had fled from some disaster in her homeland, carrying her children across 50 kilometers of hostile wilderness, seeking help for her dying offspring. And somehow she had known that he was here. Somehow she had known that humans existed on this world. The implications were staggering. The aliens had been aware of human presence from the beginning. They had watched the colonization efforts, studied human behavior, perhaps even learned about human technology and capabilities. The mother's decision to come to his door hadn't been random or desperate. It had been calculated based on information and perhaps even hope that humans might be willing to help. Marcus looked at the infant, whose breathing seemed slightly stronger now that warmth and nutrition had been provided. The older child was sitting up slightly, those remarkable silver eyes studying the human who had taken them in. Whatever had happened in their homeland, whatever disaster had driven them into the wilderness, these were survivors. The mother reached into a fold of her clothing and withdrew something that made Marcus's breath catch. It was a piece of technology, clearly alien in origin but unmistakably sophisticated. The device was smooth and organic looking, yet it pulsed with internal light in patterns that suggested advanced circuitry. She held it out to him, speaking earnestly. Marcus understood. It was a gift, or perhaps payment for his help. But more than that, it was proof that her people possessed technology that might be far beyond human understanding. This small device could represent advances in science that could benefit both species enormously. As he accepted the alien artifact, Marcus realized that he was holding something that would change the course of human expansion in this sector of space. But right now, All that mattered were the two small lives bundled in thermal blankets and the brave mother who had risked everything to save them. The infant made a small sound, something between a chirp and a sigh, and the mother's face lit up with joy. It was the first sound the child had made since arriving, and it meant that Marcus's basic medical care was working. The human and the alien mother shared a moment of triumph that transcended species barriers, united in their relief that the smallest life had been pulled back from the brink of death. The rain on Kepler 442b fell differently than Earth rain. Each drop carried trace minerals that made the air shimmer with an oily rainbow sheen, and the sound it made against the metal roof of Marcus Chen's outpost was like 1,000 tiny bells ringing in discord. He had grown used to it over the 3 years he'd been stationed here, but tonight the sound seemed more urgent, more desperate. Marcus sat at his workbench, carefully calibrating the atmospheric processors that would make this sector of the planet habitable for the next wave of human colonists. The work was delicate, requiring precise measurements and calculations that could mean the difference between a thriving settlement and a toxic wasteland. His weathered hands moved with practiced precision, adjusting flow rates and checking pressure readings on equipment that hummed quietly in the background. The frontier outpost was small but efficient, built to house a single technician for extended periods. Solar panels and fusion cells provided power, while recycling systems ensured that nothing was wasted. The walls were lined with emergency supplies, communication equipment, and the tools of his trade. Outside, automated defense turrets scanned the perimeter, watching for the large predators that roamed this world's wilderness. A sharp knock at the door made Marcus freeze. In 3 years, no one had ever knocked on his door. Supply ships landed at the designated pad and announced themselves over comms. The automated systems would alert him to any approaching vehicles or aircraft. But this was different. This was the sound of knuckles against metal, deliberate and unmistakably organic. Marcus reached for the plasma rifle mounted near the door, his training kicking in. First contact protocols were clear. Unknown alien species were to be treated as potentially hostile until proven otherwise. The Galactic Council had strict rules about human expansion, and unauthorized contact with indigenous species could result in the complete abandonment of a colony world. The knocking came again, softer this time, almost pleading. Marcus activated the external cameras and felt his blood run cold. On his doorstep stood a figure that was unmistakably alien, yet heartbreakingly familiar in its desperation. She was tall and willowy, standing nearly 7 feet in height with pale blue skin that seemed to absorb the light from his porch illuminators. Her features were delicate and angular, with large eyes that reflected the light like polished silver. What appeared to be hair cascaded down her back in tendrils that moved independently, responding to some unfelt breeze. She wore simple clothing that might have once been white, but was now stained with mud and what looked like dried blood. But it wasn't her alien appearance that made Marcus's heart race. It was what she carried. In her arms, pressed against her chest, were 2 small forms. Children, unmistakably her offspring, their tiny bodies shivering in the cold rain. They shared her blue-tinged skin and silver eyes, but their features were softer, more vulnerable. The smaller one couldn't have been more than an infant, while the other appeared to be perhaps 5 or 6 years old in human terms. The alien mother looked directly into the camera, and Marcus saw something in her expression that transcended species barriers. It was the look of a parent who had exhausted every other option, who was willing to risk everything for the chance to save her children. Her mouth moved, and though the external audio pickups couldn't translate her words, the universal language of desperation needed no interpretation. Marcus's hand tightened on the rifle as his mind raced through the possibilities. The planet had been surveyed extensively before colonization began. There were no signs of intelligent life, no cities or technology, no indication that sentient beings called this world home. Yet here she stood, proof that the surveys had been wrong. The implications were staggering. If this world had an indigenous intelligent species, human colonization would be immediately halted. The Galactic Council would investigate, assess the situation, and likely declare the planet off limits to human settlement. The 3 years of preparation work would be for nothing. Worse, Marcus could face court-martial for failing to report first contact immediately. But as he watched the alien mother sway slightly in the rain, her children growing smaller and more still in her arms, protocol seemed like a distant concern. The smaller child wasn't moving at all now, and the mother's silver eyes were beginning to lose their focus. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He powered down the external defense systems and moved to the door controls. The airlock hissed as it cycled, equalizing pressure and scanning for biological contaminants. The readings showed unknown organic compounds, but nothing immediately dangerous to human physiology. The atmospheric composition was compatible with the alien's apparent respiratory needs. When the inner door opened, the alien mother nearly collapsed. Up close, Marcus could see that she was in worse condition than the cameras had revealed. Deep scratches marked her arms and face, and her clothing was torn in several places. She had been running, fighting, fleeing from something. She looked up at Marcus with those luminous silver eyes and spoke in a voice like wind chimes. Though he couldn't understand her words, her meaning was clear. She was begging him to help her children. Marcus lowered his rifle and stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. She hesitated for just a moment, perhaps realizing that she was entrusting her life and the lives of her children to a member of an alien species. Then she stepped across the threshold, water dripping from her hair tendrils onto his metal floor. As the door sealed behind them, Marcus knew there was no going back. He had just violated every first contact protocol in existence. He had potentially compromised humanity's expansion into this sector of space. He had risked his career, his freedom, and possibly his life. But as he looked at the exhausted mother clutching her dying children, he knew he would make the same choice again. Some things transcended species, transcended protocol, transcended the careful calculations of galactic politics. Sometimes the only choice that mattered was the choice to help. The alien mother collapsed to her knees in his entryway, finally allowing herself to show the full extent of her exhaustion, now that her children were out of the rain. She looked up at Marcus with an expression of gratitude so profound it needed no translation, and whispered something that sounded like a blessing in her musical language. Marcus Chen, atmospheric technician and unwitting first contact specialist, knelt down beside her and gently reached out to check on the children. In doing so, he took the first step into a situation that would test everything he thought he knew about humanity, about compassion, and about what it truly meant to be human in a vast and often hostile universe.